All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Eddie Hearn throws some shots or takes some shots at Bob Arum over Bob Arum and Top Rank's ranking ratings on ESPN during their return to boxing, which took place last week and the week before that. Suffice it to say that the numbers were really shabby. And Eddie Hearn has a point, but at the same time, dude, you're in a glass house throwing stones. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, look, man, it's been a really tough year on a lot of people in the boxing world. Fighters that can't get fights, fight fans that want to see fights that can't see good fights, promotional companies that have overhead associated with their boxing, with their organization that can't put on fights. Therefore, they have to dip in, either have to let go of employees, or they got to dip into their cash reserves in order to pay those people on their staff. So it's just all around is a really rough scenario. And then the fans themselves, right? A lot of people have lost their jobs, don't have necessarily have the money, or they're taking second jobs that are out in the street, like Uber drivers and food Lyft drivers and people delivering food. So the whole situation in boxing right now is just really messed up. So during these times, you can really see the strength of an organization, right? And what you see from Top Rank is you see that they just do not have a lot of very good fighters, and they have not been able to put on shows where that have been compelling and are the type of fights that people want to spend their afternoon or their evenings watching, right? So, like, for example, myself, I'm a huge boxing fan, and I love watching boxing matches. I watch all kind of boxing matches, but as far as the ESPN cards that took place last week, I think I might have watched one fight. I was upset that I didn't get to see the Anthony Guerrero fight, where Anthony Guerrero lost to Magic Mike, but I did get to see the Shakur Stevenson fight. I thought it was excellent. I mean, I had a good time watching Shakur Stevenson fight, but other than that, it wasn't, it's just nothing on any of those cards that really motivated me to say, hey, let me make sure I get done with all my work and, not work on stuff related to the Patreon, and make sure I sit down and watch these fights. It just did not have it wasn't the quality of cards that would have motivated me, to watch that instead of watching a rerun of a great fight, right? I would rather watch, there's so many excellent fighters out there from days past whose fights are still on YouTube or on Daily Motion and sites like that you can get a lot of really good world-class fighting and not necessarily have to watch two guys that you don't care anything about in a fight that is short and most likely a mismatch. So, when ESPN's rankings came out, it wasn't surprising at all that their ratings didn't do very well. I do believe that, and I'm not going to lay out all of the ratings, but I know that throughout both weeks, the average was somewhere for all of the fights. The average viewership was somewhere between 330,000 and 370,000 average, right? And then for certain fights like the Shakur Stevenson fight, it peaked at like 600,000 for his fight. But for the rest of them, the peaks were somewhere around 400,000, except for the last night of it, where the peak, which is why you got to tell you, I'm telling you, this particular stat right here tells you exactly how bad Top Rank performed. Top Rank had their biggest peak of the week was a Saturday card that came on after, I do believe, something connected to the UFC, and the peak for it was 700,000, right? 700,000, but the peak wasn't at the last fight. It wasn't at the I think it might have been the Franco fight, but it wasn't for the peak wasn't for the headline fight or the Burchelt fight, because it was Burchelt. The peak wasn't for the Burchelt fight. The peak was for the very first fight where people hung over from the UFC fight, and which I think averaged or peaked at somewhere like 1.2, So there was around at the end of the UFC card, my understanding is that their ratings were somewhere around 1.2 million. And then when boxing came on, then it dipped down to 700,000. And then after it got to dip down to 700,000 at the beginning of the broadcast, by the time it got down to the main event, it was down to 300 and it was down to averaging 390,000 for the main event, somewhere around there. So you can see that, that they backed up something that had more interest in it. And when they got and saw those first fights that were on, they were like, nah, I'm not sticking around for this. This is garbage. And they moved on. Right. So clearly what Eddie Hearn is saying about Bob Arum and these rankings being bad are very true. But here's the thing. Yes, those are bad numbers. Those aren't good. There's no reason why Bob Arum should have the sport of boxing and in an environment where there's no other live sports really going on, that you should be pulling worse numbers than you were pulling when there was all kind of competition for live sports. Like, how could your numbers actually go down, right? That speaks to a lot of things about Top Rank and a lot about the sport of boxing. Top Rank has been for years trying to feed people who they thought should be the champion, instead of getting people who have a large following in the United States, or has a potential for a large following in the United States. And so, they just don't have the people that are attractive. And even before this, they were getting killed by Fox. Now, Fox is, available to a few more people, because it's just a telecast that's, you don't need cable to get. But still, I mean, you're seeing guys like Caleb Plant outdoing and getting better numbers than Terrence Crawford gets on ESPN. That has to do with the marketing and the promoting of the fighter. It has to. But for Eddie Hearn to be talking, it's like, man, you got to be kidding me. What does Eddie Hearn have to say to Bob Arum? Because Eddie Hearn's numbers are going to be even worse when he comes back on. When they put fights back on Dazn, dude, who is going to watch those fights at all? I mean, I really think that they might have viewership for fights on ESPN that are in the 4-digit range, right? How they say I'm a 6-figure dude, 7-figure dude. I'm talking about like four somewhere in the 4 digits, 9,999 viewers and below. Because who's going to sign up for Dazn to get this nonsense? You're not going to be putting on mega fights, right? Like, you're not going to be putting on mega fights. Who's going to sign back up? Who in their right mind would sign back up to Dazn to see guys like Billy Joe Saunders fight to fight Howard Eastman, or not Howard Eastman. You remember Howard Eastman? Howard Eastman, and man, the names just popped into my mouth. But there was another guy. What's the guy's name? Eggington. Right, I know that he's probably a smaller weight class than that, but Liam Smith versus Sam Eggington. Dude, nobody wants to see that nonsense. Nobody wants to see, and people don't want to see Tevin Farmer either. So it's like, what is Dazn gonna do that is going to improve upon the numbers for ESPN? Like, what is Dazn gonna do that's going to improve on those numbers? They have fewer fighters of interest. And they don't even have the network for people to watch it on, which is like onto a video that I'm going to do later today about Ryan Garcia and why Ryan Garcia just needs to bounce up off of Golden Boy. But anyway, you see all this. Now, the funny thing is that both of these organizations, both Top Rank and Dazn, are considered, two of the top promotional companies, in the world, man. And if they really are, man, that just really tells you what bad shape boxing is in. And I believe it's primarily because of how it's administered. You got all these stupid sanctioning bodies and all these extra weight classes. You also have this fixation about everything being a championship fight. If you got rid of all of these dang on sanctioning bodies and you got rid of all of these all these extra weight classes, and you had just one champion in a division, then you could sell fights as if, because it would literally be leading to this fighter taking on the champion, right? So you could sell them that this fight actually matters for something. You know, most like all of the basketball games that you watch, those basketball games actually, they matter. They matter in the rankings. They matter in, like, you know, what position, playoff position you're going to be in, right? It matters if you make the playoff. These games, there's a lot of tension brought up in other sports into non-championship events. But here in boxing, we just try to sell everything as if it's a championship. So you got 1 million championships and 1 million weight classes. And as a result, you know, very few of them are anything that people are going to actually care about. So anyway, that's my take on it. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.